Greetings everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Policy to Practice podcast powered by Center for Development Policy and Practice. I am the host for the day, Ablaz Mohammed Schemnad, and I welcome you all to the episode. Today we have with us Professor Rathin Roy. He is an eminent person in the area of economics and economic policy practice and macroeconomic observations of economics throughout the world. Welcome to have you, sir, and it's a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you.
So before we start off with our questions, how would you like to describe yourself?
I think you did a good job. I'm a macroeconomist interested in political economy. And I've worked on the political economy of human development. I've been a diplomat, an economic diplomat. I've been a civil servant,
Right.
but as an economist.
Right.
And I've been an academic. So I've done almost everything except, and I also had a think tank in London. So I've done almost everything, I guess. And yes, at the beginning of my career as a stockbroker.
All right.
So I really have done everything in bits and pieces, and now I'm looking forward to doing more of less.
Right. Very well said, sir. So far you have been a senior fellow at ODI London, and you are currently distinguished professor at School of Public Policy.
That's
so from that angle and your practices in economics. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, inequality per se, economic inequality, and its impact on everyday interactions of society, specifically to our country. So what is the situation of inequality in India economically, and how unequal are we, and what are the reasons for it? If you could give an overview for our distinguished, enthusiastic observers.
Okay, thank you. I suppose I should start by giving you a very interesting fact that before the Industrial Revolution, let's say before 1750, 1800
Right.
AD, every country was a highly unequal place, in the sense that the top 2, 3 to 4% of the population earned 90% of the income, held 90% of the wealth, and the rest suffered. Low levels of income, low levels of prosperity, low levels of wealth. But between country inequality was very limited. So England was as unequal as India, but England was not richer than India. Which means that, broadly speaking, the per capita income of a country was equal to its population. So when people say India was the second richest or first richest or third richest country in the world, it doesn't mean anything. It's because there were more people in India, it was richer.
Right.
Within India, there was as much inequality as in Britain or in France, etc.
Right.
Now, that changes after the Industrial Revolution for three reasons. One, there's a huge expansion in international trade.
Correct.
And there are winners and losers from that. So countries like the UK and the US won, countries like India lost. Secondly, there was colonialism. So countries like the UK and France won and India lost. And the third was the most interesting in my view, which is the fact that the transition from being predominantly an agrarian economy to being an industrial economy was an equalizing transition. I'll come back to this. That transition in India has always been incomplete, even after independence.
Right.
And there's a very interesting trajectory to that inequality transition. But let me encapsulate it for you. India is in a very bad place in terms of income inequality for many reasons. But in the context of what I'm saying, the fact that the proportion of people dependent on agriculture or agriculture-related activities for their livelihoods today is higher than it was 15 years ago. It's almost 50%. But agriculture contributes only 17% of our GDP.
Correct.
So a larger number, almost half our population is dependent on producing a very small part of our GDP. That itself should lead to massive inequality, and it has. It's only one reason. But that is the transition I'm talking about. The transition to a modern economy is what India has not experienced. And economic inequality in India, its chief dimension is in our attempt to recover from the losses of colonialism, of international trade, and to become an advanced economy. We have succeeded in only half of it, which is agriculture no longer accounts for more than 17% of GDP. Remaining 83% is manufacturing and services.
Right.
But employment is still heavily dependent on agriculture. Then there are many other dimensions of this which we can tease out, but that is the fundamental, if you like, historical parameter confronting India that we have failed to address or even ameliorate since independence.
Pretty much, and it gives an overview of our economic inequality. So, adding on to that, as I've said, the deindustrialization and our over concentration of employment in the agriculture sector and things like that, do we see a spatial mobility in terms of migration? Just to briefly address that, and across years, post-independence, preferably for that as an answer. Do we see decadal variations in economic inequality as per the data shows till 2024 where we are currently at? Anything?
That's, I think, a very important and interesting question which every Indian should reflect on without feeling scared.
Right.
Nothing to be ashamed of in saying or appreciating what I'm going to say. Which is every Indian has an asset class. There may be exceptions who have read our Chitrakatha or every Indian who is largely concerned about their own prosperity, who is not in the top 1% of the population, their first preferred option tends to be to migrate.
True.
Whether if you are in a rich state like Kerala, the richest state in India, the richest major state in India, with a per capita income close to Indonesia. Do I need to tell you that Kerala's preferred option is migration?
Right.
They migrate.
Exactly.
They migrate, except that they migrate to the Gulf and America and now Europe. Best Kerala food I got was in London. I can't get any Kerala food in Hyderabad. But the sadhya, the Onam sadhya I got in London showed me that Keralites are migrating everywhere now. It's very difficult not to find a Keralite or rather high per capita income state, Punjabi restaurant anywhere in the world because they migrate. That's their preferred option. The sad people of Bengal, Bihar and UP, whose per capita income with UP and Bihar is lower than Nepal, they migrate. But they migrate to the south. They migrate to Kerala, they migrate to Hyderabad, they migrate to Bombay. So everyone in India is migrating, which shows you that the problem is not just poor people are migrating because they are suffering. No. Everyone is migrating. And everyone is migrating because everyone faces a business model where the most efficient way they can transition to prosperity is through migration to a richer region. India is now the second biggest source of migrants to the US after Mexico. And the biggest migrants to the United States, second biggest source of migration to the US, after Mexico.
Right.
And the biggest migration to the United States is happening from two rich states, Gujarat and Punjab. That's illegal migration.
Right.
In terms of legal migration, the good people of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana are the biggest population, Telugus, of migrants to the United States. Now obviously the people who are going there are not farmers or halim producers. There could be some. The majority of them are IT professionals. And one of them has become head of Google, I understand, or something of the sort. So the ubiquity of Indian migration is neither dependent on your income level or your class level or your education level. It is just that the country does not afford you a pathway to non-vulnerable, predictable prosperity that you get when you migrate to another geography. If you're rich, to a foreign geography. If you're poor, from the relatively poor geographies of the north to the richer geographies of the south and the west.
Correct.
So migration is a profound marker of the second dimension of economic inequality.
Right.
which is not looking at the outcome of inequality, which is income inequality. That's an outcome, or consumption inequality. You consume less because of inequality, so that's an outcome you're observing. But something that you can do something about, which is the process inequality in economics, which is inequality of opportunity and of what Amartya Sen called capability.
Capability approach, exactly. Yeah, very true. Adding on to that, wherever you go, there's a Malayali, and it just, as the language said, that you have 3 states where Telugu speakers are dominant: Telangana, Andhra, and it's Texas. As a fun man.
San Diego,
yeah. Okay. Right, sir. So you have addressed economic inequality, you have addressed how opportunities lack in certain regions and spatial mobility is there, which adds on to economic, it's an increase when it comes to spatial mobility to a place where it's richer. So adding on to that, as a policy to practice think tank and research organization, and also your area of expertise lately and right from the beginning, economic policy and macroeconomic observations, what are the policy challenges as a country as diverse as India in terms of demography as well as inequality? Because socio-culturally or socio-politically, this economic inequality will be varying across caste, gender, class, and region, everywhere. So the challenge of a policy maker, what could that be from an angle of a policy analyst researcher?
The challenge is a structural one, and the structural challenge is something that any country without the additional challenges of gender and caste and ethnicity would face. So the structural challenge that I would describe is complicated further in India by caste, ethnicity, gender, etc. But it's a challenge that most countries have seen and have failed to address, which is why the majority of the countries in the world are not developed countries and are not going to be. I'm not talking about poor countries like India. I'm talking about all the countries that are stuck in a trap where they are not developed despite earning $10,000 per capita, which means they have all the problems of developing countries: poverty, malnutrition, poor healthcare, poor education, violence, unpredictable lives. These are called middle-income countries, and they are fated to remain middle-income countries forever. Brazil, I'm going to take you on a tour of the globe of such failures. Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, all countries 5 times as rich as India. Mexico, 10 times as rich as India. Egypt, South Africa. I'm not talking about a single poor country. Every country I mentioned to is richer than India.
Okay.
Thailand, per capita.
Yeah.
Thailand, Sri Lanka, Russia, Philippines. That should be enough. There are many more. So, what is the problem that these countries have had? Why are they earning at least $8,000 to $10,000 per capita, but not able to make the transition to being a developed country? A developed country is a place where prosperity is such that everyone can afford the basic things of life plus a few luxuries from their own pocket, where there is no poverty. This is not the case in most of the world. Now in India so far we could have said that we don't belong in this category. We are a poor country, and therefore if we become rich, we will solve these problems. But what the lesson these countries give us is that is not so simple, because inequality can come in between. I think what happened in India when we stopped being a poor country and started to grow significantly would be just after 1980, and then it was accelerated with economic liberalization in 1991. So, if you look at this phase of growth, ask yourself, how has India grown? On the basis of what has it grown? And to do that, to keep it simple, look at what Bombay looks at, or any investor looks at, as the leading fast-moving indicators of the Indian economy.
Right.
The leading fast-moving indicators of the Indian economy, if you go to Bombay, are fast-moving consumer goods, air travel, high-end real estate,
Right.
so on and so forth. Automobiles. These are not things that are consumed by the majority of Indians. Right? Majority of Indians don't own these things. But who consumes them? The minority of Indians. I would say the top 10 to 15%, here I'm including two-wheelers also.
Right.
Top 10 to 15% of the Indian population. 100 to 150 million people. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So if the 100 to 150 million people are a bigger market than Germany, you will be able to sell every item you can sell in Germany in India.
True.
From a BMW to a bottle of single malt whiskey to a foreign holiday in Japan or the US to air travel, right? But it's not that the remaining 85% of the population are poor. About half the population of India at least earns the minimum wage wherever they live, or more than the minimum wage, 2 to 3 times the minimum wage. At least half. That's 500 million.
Okay.
So what is happening to the things that they demand? That 350 million. So 400 million, 350, 400. So under a rich, they want ACs and shampoo and foreign holidays and cars and two-wheelers. What about the remaining? To ask this question, you have to think like an economist and not a communist. By which I mean, think about people like you think of yourselves. You are all presumably age. Think of me or you. When you earn a living, so the bottom 500 I'm excluding, they are poor, they don't earn a living, they need subsidies, they need help. But if you are earning the minimum wage or double the minimum wage, what do you expect to do with that money? What you want is unfortunately what the Prime Minister does not understand, although he uses the word. What you want is to be Atmanirbhar.
Right, self-reliant.
You don't want subsidies and handouts. You want to be able to buy things for yourself and your family using your own income. And I will put it to you that there are 5 things that somebody earning a minimum wage at least, and certainly double the minimum wage or triple the minimum wage, should be able to afford without subsidy on the basis of their own income. First is a decent meal for their family.
Right.
Second is clothing for their family.
Absolutely.
Third is in their lifetime they should be able to acquire one house. Fourth, a reasonable level of health.
True.
Fifth, that is they should be able to pay for their health. Whether you provide it through government and tax them or whether they pay for it privately is a separate issue of efficiency and. And fifth, education. They should be able to finance a decent level of education. Everyone earning the per capita income or more than that should be able to. In the remaining half you can subsidize. Should be able to use it unsubsidized way. Let's look at each of them. Agriculture. You're subsidizing 800 million people. Giving 800 million people in this country a food subsidy. That is more than half the population. Everything in agriculture is subsidized, from fertilizers to input to outputs to MSP to the food outside. So there is no way that somebody can go to the market and buy an unsubsidized square meal for their family, simply not available. Or put another way, the end result of all this subsidy is that even if I earn a minimum wage, I still need subsidized food grains. Right? Clothing. This shirt I am wearing is a Marks and Spencer shirt. It costs 3,000 rupees, or something like that. It is made in India 100%. If you go and buy a 300 rupee shirt, which is something that a person earning the minimum wage would want, 82% of them, of shirts at that price range, are imported from Bangladesh or Vietnam. Not China, Bangladesh or Vietnam. What kind of a country is this where you can produce shirts for the rich but you can't produce shirts for the poor? Housing. I can get a loan to build a 40 lakh house. Moment I want to build a 10 lakh house or 15 lakh house, going to the market, taking EMI, I need Pradhan Mantri Abbas Yojana, this Yojana, that Yojana. Health. If you're rich, you get great healthcare in India. If you're poor, you're relying on ration public healthcare because you can't afford to get good health care, and the system is not able to provide you good health care despite the fact that you are a minimum wage. Education, same thing. There is abandonment happening. Elites are leaving India to be educated abroad, and the poor are therefore getting worse and worse education. So in sum, what I'm saying is, these are the 5 things that somebody earning the minimum wage could afford. Somebody today who is earning the minimum wage in India is not able to afford these 5 things, which is why these 5 things are not part of the leading indicators of the Indian economy. And air conditioners are, and cars are, but not health, but not education, because there's no market for them. Despite the fact that people earning income would like to purchase these things at affordable prices. Absolutely. That is the economic challenge that India is facing. We may have become the 5th largest economy in the world. Right. But whether it is Tamil Nadu with the per capita income close to Indonesia, or UP, which is much worse, with the per capita income to less than Nepal, people earning the minimum wage still cannot afford these 5 things. And that is the biggest marker of inequality. And India is moving to the Brazil, Argentina category instead of the South Korea, China category that I can think of. If we don't change this, we will become Brazil. We will only become Japan if we change this. By which I mean, and this will also solve the migration problem. I'll tell you how. Right. If 60% of our future growth comes from these 5 things, 20 comes from what is coming now, all this 2-wheeler, 4-wheeler, AC, and 20% comes from exports, we will be a sustainable, inclusive, growing economy with a chance to become Japan. If we don't do that, if we don't change the structure, we are doomed to become Brazil. That is the magnitude of the challenge facing us.
Pretty much, sir, pretty much. Thank you for that answer. As concluding remark, the idea is about India is growing. India is booming economically for the last 30 years, if I have to say, post-neoliberal practice of globalization in India as well. Have we seen trickling down happening? Is the rising tide raising us all?
From what I said, obviously not. It's much worse than that. You're not seeing trickling down, meaning there is not even a bowl for people to hold any trickle. 100 million, you spoke of demography, 100 million Indians today, and that number has gone up from 40 million 10 years ago. Young Indians between 18 and 18 and 35, are neither in education, full-time or part-time, or looking for a job. 100 million. Fact 1. Fact 2, your probability of being unemployed in this country is higher, the higher your education qualification. How can there be trickle down in such an economy, in such a country?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for all the answers. It was quite insightful, and it has given, for budding researchers like me and the audience, most of the audience, majority of the audience, triggering points to do research and understand more on that field.
Thank you very much.